Next up, some fall camp position battles. And we've gotten some news from the press conferences from Campbell, from Taylor Mauser, from Colby Cratch, and things like that, for just kind of different how different things are shaken out. Starting on the offensive side of the ball, Carson Hansen and Abu Sama actually just today were both named to the Doak Walker Award watch list, so that's pretty cool having two Doak Walker watch list guys on the roster at the same time. I don't know if there's a position battle there as much, so much as they're just trying to figure out where Dylan Lee and River Peppers fit into this thing. Because I think the staff likes them both, want to get them on the field, but you got Carson Hansen and Abu Sama. So you got to do something with, they're going to get the bulk of the carries, but you want to just find a way to work Dylan Lee and River Peppers into the offense and just figure out how you can do it. Plus there's also Aiden Flora who actually got some decent playing time last year. Got carries in, against Baylor and the Pop-Tart Bowl and a few other games, so it's interesting that he's involved there too. They've got 5 running backs that, I think are probably going to get snaps this season at some point. And it's a very deep room with some really interesting potential guys in there. The tight end one, though, has been brought up. I don't think it's really a conversation so much as is Ben Bramer there, starting as Gabe Burkle starting. It's going to be Ben Bramer and Gabe Burkle are going to be 1 and 2. Whatever one you want to put where, I guess. But it just depending on the formation, the play of the running and stuff like that is how they'll determine that. But, Ben Bramer and Gabe Burkle are definitely your 1 and 2. But the position battle, as Matt Campbell described it as a position battle, was really if Cooper Alexander, how he's going to get involved with this. Now, Cooper Alexander redshirted last year. He was hurt for a good chunk of last year. But if you remember, he came out of Oklahoma, a high 3-star, I think maybe even a low 4-star guy in some services, tight end that I would say got out of Oklahoma. He picked us over the Sooners. Talented guy, played receiver in high school and just kind of bulked up a little bit to play tight end in college. The kid's a good route runner. He's got great hands. We just got to see how they're going to work him in, whether it's they're running 12 personnel and it's just Ben Bramer and Cooper Alexander instead of Gabe Burkle, or how they're going to do that. But I think it's interesting that that he's getting a talk, here, as a third tight end that's going to get involved in this rotation. You're going to see Cooper Alexander at some point. Like, it's going to happen, but just, we got to see how much that's going to happen. On the offensive line, from what I understand, is that, James Neal, Tyler Miller, and Dylan Barrett are, basically, well, Tyler Miller and James Neal seem to be cemented into the left tackle and right tackle spots. Brendan Black has moved inside to center, but it sounds like he's also, like, the center position is also kind of competing with like Jim Boniface and maybe even Dylan Barrett. I would think Dylan Barrett would start at left guard like he did last year. But Iowa State typically does the best 5 strategy to formulating an offensive line. It's not my favorite, but I get it. You want to get your 5 most talented players, and they should, the interior guys especially should know how to play every position. I wish that they would be less fluid about, less, gung ho about, oh, let's move this guard to center, this center to guard, this guard to the other guard, this guard to tackle, this tackle to guard. I do wish that they would sort of, tinker with that a little bit less. Because I think if you can have people that come into the program and they get really good at the tackle spots, left tackle, right tackle, but, maybe mainly left tackle type thing. If you can have tackles and guards and centers, I just think that's the best way to maximize it going forward, where your centers can be centers and they can, because the center is a different offensive line position than the other 4. The guards have a different skill set and different task list than a tackle, but the center is unique to the line, being someone that's calling out, they're calling out assignments. They're identifying Mike linebackers. They're identifying, maybe helping delegate pass protections and things like that. Helping to communicate pass protections. They're kind of the informal captain of the offensive line. So that takes a different skill set, and I think you'd be better off just like this guy's going to be a center. This guy's going to be a guard. This guy's going to be a tackle. Um, Even if they mirror across the line, across the center, I really would like them to specialize more a little bit on those spots and just instead of doing the best five approach. However, this is me communicating that on a YouTube show. And they are the ones currently coaching a Power 5 football or Power 4 football team that was in a Big 12 championship game last year. So I will defer to their wisdom, but it seems to make sense to me to try to specialize players a little bit more rather than doing the best five approach. But like I said, they're the experts. I'm I'm hosting a podcast. So be interesting to see how that shakes out. Dylan Barrett, Brendan Black, Jim Boniface, Trevor Burr. There was a couple young guys that he brought up as well, but we'll see. Generally speaking, unless there's a really big standout or a very like a specific position of fairly dire need, I would say it is generally pretty slow to get. They're not really gung ho about putting freshmen out there on the offensive line. But if there's a freshman kicking ass and earning a spot in the rotation, then who am I to tell them otherwise? Moving to the defensive side of the ball, defensive end continues to be. I mean, that's the thing. That's the position that needs to be sorted out. Defensive tackle, nose tackle is basically set in stone. It's Dominique Orange, it's Zamir Hawk, and there's probably a few other guys in there too, but those are your two guys mainly. On the edge, it's got to be somebody. The defensive end, it's got to be Kenny Yogu or Cannon Butler or Vontroy Malone or any Miles Mendezoon, whoever it's got to be. All four of them will play. But we talked about this last week a little bit, but this line needs to get its shit together. One thing we did find out though is that Samuel Same has been moved back, or at least I don't think it's been announced I don't know if it's been announced in the presser or not, but Samuel Same has been moved back to offense or to outside linebacker. And which I think is really interesting because you see outside linebackers dropping down to the defensive line fairly frequently. But you really don't often see defensive line move back to the linebacker spot. Usually you'll see a linebacker move down to the defensive end spot they if they're struggling in coverage or whatever it needs to be. You don't see defensive ends move back very much. But that tells me though is that they're planning on basically using him as a stand-up edge rusher of sorts. Like kind of like how we think we'll see Caleb Bacon this year, where he's just a guy. It's gonna be your Von Miller, Khalil Mack types, where they're stand up on the edge and they're gonna go get it. Now Khalil Mack has had his hand in the dirt more than Von Miller, but that kind of player, just a guy coming off the edge that can be full speed off the edge, basically. So that's an interesting thing there as far as bolstering the pass rush. But I've heard that Vontroy Malone has had good practices, he's a transfer from Tulsa, that he's stood out. I have not heard anything about Tomatoa McDonough, which is a guy, the Yale transfer. I was kind of excited to see and thought maybe had a shot at getting involved here, but haven't heard much about him. Haven't heard much about Cannon Butler. That doesn't mean that either of those two aren't going to play. I mean, they came into play, I would assume. But that position room's got to get figured out. Linebacker. Linebacker is a really interesting one because there are so many returning snaps and starts in this group. It is by far the deepest linebacker group in the Big 12. And I have no evidence for this because I haven't looked at all the rosters, but I would assume that Iowa State that no other roster in college football has as much returning experience at linebacker as Iowa State. No, there's no way anybody has, you know, 10 guys that have started games and a good chunk and a few more that have played, backup level snaps type of thing. Iowa State's got 10 or 12 guys that they can run out this year that have played before and have played well before. Plus, they've got other young guys that really didn't play last year, like Mason Miller did not play last year. Will Hawthorne, brand new incoming true freshman, was, fairly highly touted recruit, but don't know exactly what he's going to be, early on. But he's sitting behind so many linebackers right now. I don't know if there's a lot of snaps to be had necessarily. So we'll see. I'd be curious to see how they work that out, because obviously Cooper Ebel played well for a lot of last year, even though he was really banged up. If I were putting money down on it right now, my guess is your three starting linebackers are gonna be Caleb Brazina, I'm gonna say Caleb Bacon. There's four of them here. It's gonna be Caleb Bacon, Caleb Brazina, Will McLaughlin, and Cooper Ebel are gonna be your four. I think three of those four, I don't think you can not start Caleb Bacon. Caleb Bacon has to be one of the starters. He's going to play on the edge. He's not playing in the middle. Will McLaughlin has pretty much only played on the outside most of his career. So if Will McLaughlin and Caleb Bacon are each on the outside, that in my mind leaves, so you need a middle linebacker. Cooper Ebel only played on the outside last year. Could he play in the middle? Maybe. I don't know. Caleb Brazina did play in the middle last year and played very, very well in the middle. For that reason, my guess is that your starting three is going to be Will McLaughlin, Caleb Bacon, and Caleb Brazina. But Carson Willich was supposed to start last year, and he got hurt. So Carson Willich is somewhere in here. And there's Cooper Ebel, who started out, most games last year. Then there's John Klosterman, who played well last year. There's Zach Lovett, who was injured a bunch last year, but he's coming back and he's played a bunch of snaps. Then there's Will Hawthorne, and then there's Bo Goodwin, who played a bunch of snaps towards the end of the year. And there's Ryland Barnes, who started a bunch of games last year. And I don't know what you do with it all. I don't know how you divide snaps or any of that, but you've got a wealth of resources there. Chris is exactly right. A lot of linebacker rotations, guys are going to be really fresh. And that's honestly, with as many injuries as they had last year, you don't want to rotate too much, because you want to let guys be able to get a feel for the game, and that you want to let them get into a rhythm. But if you really wanted to, you could rotate a whole new linebacker front in every possession or every first down or something like that, and keep guys really fresh, keep guys getting in there. And the three guys you bring in, you get three platoon squads basically rotating in, all with guys that have started football games at Iowa State. So it's a fascinating wealth of riches at the linebacker position that is, from what I can tell, is probably pretty unique in college football, and is certainly unique in Iowa State football, history, especially, in the Campbell era. Now, if you go on the back end, safety, I don't think there's really any position battles to be had right now. My guess is your starting three is going to be Jeremiah Cooper, Jamison Patton, and Tishon James. Drew Surges will be in there at some point. He will rotate in for somebody at somewhere. He's played a bunch. He came on towards last year. I know he's hurt a bunch last year. He'll be there. But the only real battle that's happening in the secondary is that second corner spot across from Jontez Williams. Now, Jontez Williams is unbelievable. I know I talked about it last week, but when he was targeted, he allowed a 19 passer rating, which is 20 points better than a quarterback throwing the ball directly into the ground 3 plays in a row, um, which is remarkable. Across from him, I think early on you're going to see, a fairly 50-50 ish split between Trey Bell and Quentin Taylor. But I would assume one of those guys will shake out at some point. And maybe they don't really care if one shakes out as kind of the starter, quote unquote. If both guys are solid there, you don't really care which one starts. You might as well just keep rotating them and just see, on a game by game basis, and just see which one's playing better, which one's covering a receiver better, whatever it is. I think there's a lot of fun rotations to be had there. The name that we've heard before is Benny Nagoye, who switched over from wide receiver last year to play corner. I had heard that that Nagoye was nicked up, but he had a little nick, but I don't know what the severity of that is, or if that's even true. But hopefully he's healthy. If he's healthy, I would expect that he will factor in somehow, somewhere. How quickly he made the transition over to DB, I'm not 100% sure, but an interesting name to keep an eye on. He's 6'3", 6'4". He's got track speed, huge vertical and stuff like that. Where it's just like Darian Porter, where if he's got the ball skills and he's got the right mindset and he's got the mental part of this down, he can be a really high end corner prospect, just like Darian Porter was. So I think that's a really exciting battle there. As far as I know, basically no battles really on special teams. I mean, if you want to call figuring out a returner a battle, you can, I guess, but they're just going to throw somebody back there. Generally speaking, kick returns that are fairly low effort for Iowa State, unfortunately. I wish they would put more into it, because Jalen Noel last year was really good doing that. We'll see. Maybe they throw Xavier Townsend back there. Maybe they throw River Peppers back there. Maybe they throw Zay Robinson back there. Maybe they could throw a lot of different guys back there. And it'd be interesting. But Duke says he thinks Drew Surges could be a sneaky good player this year. I mean, I'm open to the idea. 2 years ago, when he got more playing time, there was at times he was a little bit of a liability in deep coverage, but that was 2 seasons ago. He's been in the program for a while now. He should know where he needs to be. I think he can be a good safety back there. I don't think he'll start, but I think he's interesting as kind of an X factor at that back end, potentially to back up a Jeremiah Cooper or something like that. I think he's a really interesting name back there. So that is, to my knowledge, that is all of the position, camp battle information that has been disclosed up to this point.